And apologies for the delayed start. We were to start at exactly 10 o'clock. Mkulu was here on time, that I can confirm. It was just us solving in a few admin issues. Just to preface, Mkulu, we have invited members of the media today so that they could be briefed on our own electoral processes going into the 55th National Conference and the work that you have been doing, excellent work that you have been doing as the chair of the Electoral Committee. We've agreed that as before we start the briefing, we'll first want to convey our condolences to Mam Rita Dzanga. She was born in 1933 in Ventersdorp in the Northwest and passed away on Wednesday, the 17th of August 2022 at the age of 88, in Johannesburg, Gauteng province. She was an anti-apartheid trade unionist and a freedom fighter. On the 12th of May 1969, Mam Rita Dzanga and her husband Lawrence were detained under Section 6 of the Terrorism Act. She remained in prison for 6 months without a single change of clothing, save for the clothes she had on when she was arrested. In 1984, Mam Rita was elected as part of the inaugural leadership of the Federation of Transvaal Women, alongside other great women of fortitude, such as Sister Bennett Ncube, Albertina Sisulu, Frances Bard, and Menim Bengsita, as active patrons, with Helen Joseph and Winnie Mandela as non-active patrons. Mam Dzanga also served the people of South Africa as a lawmaker in the National Assembly for 3 consecutive terms and was awarded the Order of Luthuli by President Mbeki in 2004. Mam Dzanga's resolute conviction in the cause of justice and liberation and a determined struggle in the face of relentless state persecution and harassment stands out as an example of triumph of the human spirit over the forces of suffering, cruelty, and oppression. Her indomitable spirit is a reflection of the innate and most humane yearning to be free. She remains an embodiment of our highest ideals and inspiration to all South Africans. We lower our revolutionary banners in honor of Mam Rita Dzanga and convey our heartfelt condolences to her family, friends, and comrades. A fight for the liberation of our people will never go unnoticed. For as long as we live, Mam Rita Dzanga's spirit shall live on. Hamba kahle Mbokodo. Felt that we must just start by conveying this and hand over to Mkuluwa. He will also just give his personal account as he goes into the presentation on the Electoral Committee. Over to Mkuluwa. Okay. Yes. Yes, you can do it from here, Mkuluwa.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Pule. Good morning, members of the Fourth Estate. Let me also start off by conveying heartfelt condolences to the family of Mam Rita Dzanga. Incidentally, Mam Rita, on the 7th of this month, accompanied by Anne-Sophie de Bruyn, went to the grave of Lillian Goy and Helen Joseph, who are buried in the same grave, actually. And in that cemetery, in paying homage to Lillian Goy and Helen Joseph, Mam Rita said she will be joining them very soon. This is like on the 7th of this month. So in a sense, she had a premonition that she was about to depart from this world. And we remember very fondly her contribution in the struggle, together with her late husband, Comrade Lawrence Dzanga, who was one of those victims of the apartheid special branch of the police force because he was detained at John Foster Square and died at the hands of the interrogators at John Foster Square in 1977. So her departure, is to be marked by the ambivalence which comes with celebrating a life well lived, and at the same time mourning the departure. So, in a word, let me also just convey our condolences. This is a great loss to South Africa, and especially to the younger generation of female activists and professionals, because these stalwarts are a source of great inspiration and could share very deep insights in terms of understanding where we come from and the tools that we need to achieve a better and humanely managed country and world here. So, Ule and members of the media, let me then come back to our briefing with regards to the rules that are going to apply to the processes leading up to the 55th elective National Conference of the African National Congress. The NEC set up the Electoral Committee in terms of the 54th National Conference resolution so the remit of the Electoral Committee is to make rules and to manage selection of candidates for ANC public representatives and leadership. So these rules were approved by the National Executive Committee in its meeting in July last month. They are now to be operationalized, and of course all the other processes of regional and provincial conferences were conducted outside of these rules. Some of these rules, of course, are rules that have always been applied in terms of ANC conferences. But the idea of the National Executive Committee was that once it adopts these rules, it should start with how the National Elective Conference is conducted. And the Electoral Committee was given that responsibility. The resolutions of conference were aimed at addressing weaknesses and manipulation of selection processes, and to come up with rules for campaigning within the ANC, and to deliver candidates and leaders with capacity, integrity, and support that is needed to lead the ANC and government. The Electoral Committee itself does not select leaders or candidates. Its role is that of rule maker and referee. So the rules are now made and adopted, and the remit of the Electoral Committee is to ensure that all the processes are conducted in accordance with these rules. Election itself is run by an independent agency, and that agency has already been selected and approved. It's called elections. So the agency will conduct all the processes, and the agency is accountable to the Electoral Committee, and the Electoral Committee, should there be disputes, the Electoral Committee will then attend to those disputes and resolve them. As you know, the nominations in the ANC are the province of branches. That is why delegates to an elective conference are mainly delegates from branches. In fact, 90% of voting delegates at any conference of the ANC must be delegates from branches. So once they've nominated, the collation of all those nominations would be, the responsibility of the Electoral Committee to then collate and tally all the nominations. So for the positions of officials, that is President, Deputy President, National Chair, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, Treasurer General, would then the top three for each one of those positions would then go onto the ballot paper. So there will be three for each one of the officials. That is the top ones in accordance with nominations as tallied by the Electoral Committee. And then for the additional members of the National Executive Committee, that is the 80, there will be 200 of them that will go onto the ballot paper. And over and above these ones, these names, at conference itself, there will be an opportunity for delegates to nominate from the floor. And whoever musters 25% of voting delegates would then also be added to the ballot paper. So that's how the ballot paper will be put together. I've dealt with the role and powers of the Electoral Committee. I just want to deal with a preamble that would have to be read out to all the meetings at branch level to ensure that the participants or attendees at those meetings understand the importance of nominating leadership, because leadership selection is very, very important, and branches have to be guided through the eye of the needle criteria, so that they nominate members who basically would constitute the National Executive Committee. So the NEC is important because in between conferences, it's the highest decision-making body, and has to see to it that policies of the organization and resolutions of conference are implemented. So the success of the ANC depends, therefore, on the quality of members of the National Executive Committee, and as well as their capacity, because in practice, the NEC will not always act as a body, as a structure, because in between its own meetings, individual members of the National Executive Committee are expected to provide leadership in different instances. And that is why it is important for members to understand that once they nominate and elect members onto the National Executive Committee, they should try to nominate and elect the best that is available. And then, of course, as the public face of the organization, the NEC must reflect the values as well as the non-racial character and non-sexist character, and be representative of what we mean by unity in diversity. It must be representative of South Africans in terms of demographics. And of course, the leadership must also have political capacity, must have a proven track record, and public standing and integrity to lead the ANC, so that when they take public platforms or interact with people at any given instance, they should be out true representatives of the values of the ANC. Then, of course, there's the issue of generational mix. So we strive to ensure that at least 25% of the NEC should be made up of young people. The term young is relative because, but the membership of the Youth League is from 18 years to, 14 years to 35 years. So, however, someone who's 40 is also relatively young. At least I qualify to say so. Yeah. So there should be, in the NEC, not of the Youth League, but the ANC, there should be that generational mix. And of course, Rule 6 of the ANC Constitution stipulates that at least 50% of the leadership structures of the ANC should be women. And so the nomination as well has to basically, reflect that. And so the NEC must also, as I said, be representative in terms of demographics of the country. Now, nominees must also come from various sectors, because if you have only one sector, then you are poorer in terms of perspectives. The strength of the National Executive Committee must be that it is guaranteed of perspectives from all angles. So that is why, in terms of class stratification, in terms of geographic layout, all of that must be taken into account when you elect the National Executive Committee, and including marginalized groups, people living with disabilities, the LGBTQI plus community must also be represented in the National Executive Committee if it is to be a true representative body capable of giving leadership, then it must be as representative as all that. So the rules as approved by the National Executive Committee also ban negative and undemocratic practices that serve factions or promote slates. Those are now, in terms of the rules, banned. And so breaking and undermining these rules may actually result in disciplinary action, and the offenders may either be disqualified if they are nominees, or face disciplinary proceedings that may result in suspension or expulsion even. So the part of the rules that deals with who may stand as a candidate for the NEC flow out of the Constitution, because the Constitution of the ANC says any member in good standing who, with 10 years of unbroken service in the ANC, qualifies to be nominated and also to nominate whomsoever. So any member may stand if an active has been active for at least 10 years, then you qualify to stand for nomination onto the National Executive Committee, unless they have been found guilty of or charged with unethical or immoral conduct, any serious crime or corruption. Then those ones are disqualified. And a serious crime is one that could result in a prison sentence of longer than 6 months, and a charge defined as being charged in a court of law. The rule applies also to members who have been charged with any criminal offences in cases that are still being heard, or where a judgment or sentence is being appealed. Those ones as well are excluded from availing themselves for election. Included in this group are those who have been found guilty by the disciplinary committee of the ANC and have had their membership suspended for any period in the last 10 years. And it also applies to those who are awaiting a decision or appeal. So once you are charged like that, you are disqualified. Rules apply also to members who are temporarily suspended pending the outcome of a court or disciplinary hearing, and to members on whose cases the Integrity Commission of the ANC have completed and submitted a report and recommendation of suspension of membership or stepping aside. Those also are excluded. The Electoral Committee then will use these rules to vet all nominees on short list and exclude those affected. So the vetting by the Electoral Committee will be based on these rules. If you do not meet the criteria of having 10 years of unbroken service, and or you are facing charges and so on, the vetting will exclude you from the list of nominees. Then the ANC Code of Conduct forbids certain actions, and offenders will face disciplinary action. So these are lifted. This section is lifted directly from the Constitution of the ANC, but will indicate how these also apply to the processes leading up to the National Elective Conference. And the first one says, failing to obey any rules made in terms of the Constitution, including these very rules, sowing racism, sexism, tribal chauvinism, religious and political intolerance, regionalism, and any other form of discrimination. And that also apply to campaigns of leaders in the organization in terms of these rules. But this is lifted directly from the ANC constitution. Behavior which can bring ANC into disrepute, that also applies in terms of these rules. Provoking division, impacting negatively on unity, this applies to slates and negative campaigning. So you can't sing derogatory songs against any other nominees and so on. But this is directly from the ANC constitution. Abusing elected or employed office in ANC or state to get advantage or enrichment. Participating in any organized factional activity that goes beyond normal, recognized, free debate and campaigning. Publishing and or distributing any media publication promoting the view of any organized grouping, faction or tendency within the ANC. Undermining the respect for and or impeding the functioning of any ANC structures. This includes preventing a branch or electoral committee from carrying out their tasks. But as I said, these are lifted directly out of, from the ANC constitution. ANC Code of Conduct forbids certain actions, and offenders of that rule must face disciplinary action. If you misappropriate funds or destroy ANC property, that would get you into serious trouble. If you fight or assault another member or behaving in a disorderly manner at ANC meetings, disrupting meetings, interfering with the orderly functioning of the ANC, that will get you into serious hot water. Asking for or accepting or paying any bribe for performing or not performing any task in connection with the ANC, this practice like vote selling or buying fall directly under this rule. Prejudicing the integrity or reputation of the organization, its personnel or its operational capacity by impeding the activities of the organization. Creating divisions within its ranks or membership, doing any other act which undermines the ANC's effectiveness as an organization. This rule includes any attempts at cheating or undermining the democratic practices of the ANC. Let me go to the next section. The new rules for campaigning. The Electoral Committee believes campaigning should be allowed within these rules, and all should observe these rules. The Electoral Committee has a mandate from the 54th National Conference to rid the ANC of negative and corrupt practices in leadership selection, vote buying, and promotion of slates specifically. No delegate should vote for leaders they do not know and respect. A short CV will be published for every candidate on the final nomination list, so that each and every member can at least make a choice, from an informed position. Campaigning and lobbying should be an open process where we are all allowed to influence each other and are influenced by others within the rules and structures of the movement. The right to nominate and vote for leadership lies with ANC members, and branches who nominate should have that right of nominating and electing protected against corrupt practices who seek to manipulate and undermine the democratic processes. If you think of it, if you take away the right of members to select and elect their own leaders, you are already, in a sense, engaged in corrupt practices. So delegates get their mandate from branches and must ensure that they act in accordance with that mandate. Of course, once they engage with others, they are there to influence and be influenced. And if they are influenced, when they go back to the branches, they should be able to explain why they felt that they were influenced by superior considerations. So essentially what we're saying is that the mandate that the delegate is given by the branch must always prevail, on the proviso that there's room for influencing others and being influenced. So the rules for campaign events will apply from the time that nominations open on the 7th of September. From the 7th of September, nominations for the Electoral Conference will open. Candidates will be held responsible for preventing actions by supporters and for their campaign teams abiding by these rules. Remember, a leader does not only take responsibility for his or her own actions, they also take responsibility for those that they lead. So no one may manipulate the outcome of nominations and elections by buying support, by paying or offering services, positions, other rewards to branches and delegates for their vote to a particular candidate or candidates. No one may offer or accept such sweeteners. No campaign may quarantine delegates by separating them and keeping them away from other influences. All delegates must stay in conference accommodation with their province or league or region according to the plans of conference preparatory committee. In other words, you can't take a group of delegates and provide them with separate transport and provide them with separate accommodation so that they are not part of the conference. They are quarantined, as it were. We learned this term from COVID. So that is not permissible. No delegates may be given special food, accommodation, transport, or flights unless they are people living with disability. And even in such cases, the provincial or league secretary who takes such a decision would be held accountable for such a decision, and therefore would have to be in a position to justify why that has happened. Yeah. No one may use branded, that is a candidate's name or face, or campaign abbreviation. You have these abbreviations of factions, or T-shirts or caps, vehicles, pamphlets, posters, or other printed material to promote a candidate or group of candidates. Restrictions apply to all media and advertising that cost money. So here the rule is trying to address this whole issue of people who are members of the ANC but go by different titles. Some of them even try to introduce their own special regalia to distinguish themselves. All of that is not allowed. It's an ANC conference, you must wear ANC regalia, ANC colors. No problem with that. So, media that is available at little or no cost, such as social media, emails, SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and press releases and interviews are allowed. That you can use because you don't. It doesn't cost too much money. It doesn't cost money at all. So, in terms of regalia, only ANC T-shirts are allowed. You can, design them whatever the way you want, but it must be ANC regalia. And then there's a section that deals with organizational and public meetings. So campaigns may hold organizational or public meetings, interviews, debates, in person or virtually, or on radio, television or social media. Costs may be paid for venue, sound, travel, for organizers and candidates. Modest refreshments may be served. In other words, water, not no alcohol, no drugs or psychoactive substances are permissible. ANC structures may host organizational meetings where candidates can address members as long as all candidates are given such access in provinces. So in a province you can't only give such an organizational platform to a select a group of nominees to the exclusion of others. It has to be all of them. The Electoral Committee may approve or call debates between opposing candidates on ANC platforms to provide better information to members. The Electoral Committee will have to decide the rules and format of such debates. Mass and public media platforms may be used as long as the rules, format, and moderation are controlled by the Electoral Committee. These events should not become disorderly spectacles. No member or candidate may use any form of negative campaigning against another candidate or group of candidates. Focus should be on why support is deserved by whoever you are campaigning for. No group of NEC candidates may campaign as an organized slate or list. Candidates may express support for each other and attend campaign events together. No one may distribute lists or slates of officials and NEC members that delegates should vote for. Then consequences and objections. Members may report any infringement of these rules to the Electoral Committee or whistleblowing center that will be active from the beginning of nominations. So a center will be established, so that members who feel aggrieved by one form or other of misconduct may then report. The Electoral Committee may refer the matter to an ANC disciplinary committee, and it could lead to the disqualification of the nominee in question. Any member involved in the prohibited activities in the sections above may be suspended or expelled following a disciplinary process. Any candidate whose campaign supporters participate in such activities must condemn the actions of supporters and may be disqualified if he or she does not make a strong enough effort to end this kind of behavior. All candidates must agree to abide by these rules and to keep a clear record of all sources of donations in money or in kind and all spending on their campaign. The full financial record of every campaign must be submitted to the Electoral Committee. The Electoral Committee has the right to demand further particulars and to inspect bank statements of candidates' campaigns and campaign workers and to interview campaign organizers. The Electoral Committee may order a full disclosure of all assets, properties, investments, donations, and gifts of any member involved. This will require the full cooperation of the nominee. The Electoral Committee may also open a criminal or civil case where such is warranted. All objections against candidates' eligibility must reach the Electoral Committee by the 15th of October. And of course, each one of such objections must provide the conduct details of the objector, contact details of the objector, the name of the candidate, the grounds for objection, and any available evidence. The Electoral Committee will contact the candidate involved and give opportunity for a response. If needed, the Electoral Committee will investigate further or a hearing will be held. The ruling of the Electoral Committee will be final and will be communicated to both objector and candidate. All objections against campaign methods and use of resources may be made at any time until voting is concluded. From early August, a special whistleblowing site will be set up for those who wish to object but remain anonymous. Members should use this site carefully and avoid unfounded allegations. The Electoral Committee may censure or disqualify the candidates or refer them to the ANC disciplinary committee. Then, of course, the last part deals with our timelines. So the cut-off date for membership for conference is the 3rd of September. That is, if, new members are recruited, that's the cut-off date. From that, if you are recruited after that date, then you would not be counted as part of the membership of the ANC. And nominations, as I said, will commence from the 7th of September. Thereafter, the dates deal with the training that the Electoral Committee will have to offer and conduct to the members and other committees and relevant leaders in the structures of the organization. And of course, names, the disputes and complaints, as stated before, the Electoral Committee will rule by the 31st of October, so that names of final candidates for branches will be circulated as of the 1st of November, so that with the CVs, brief CVs attached, so that members, when they brief their delegates to conference, should do so from an informed position. So, Public Pule and members of the media, that's the salient points of the rules. I'm sure you've been furnished with the rules in full, and so if there's any clarity-seeking questions, we are here to clarify those here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mkhulua, for that comprehensive presentation. Hands are already up. Maybe members of the media also want to stand in December. Let's check. You know that 25% can attract interest here. Okay, you can go ahead.
Thanks, leadership, for the comprehensive briefing. I have comprehensive questions as well.
Okay.
And my first question, you say, of course, candidates who stand with direct code, political capacity, proven track record, and have a good standing in society. Others already are arguing that such a person who meets that criteria is yourself. As such, the others who are saying there may be a call for you to also stand, since there is a shortage of people who meet this criteria. Will you avail yourself if you are called upon to write a convene? And then second question, on the issue of 25% youth and okay, let me speak to the 25% youth. What informs the 25% when the population of the country, I think, is well more than 50% young people now? And also, why would you deviate from the constitutional description of the ANC of who is youth, which is 35, and below? You said even 40 is relatively young, but the constitutional, in terms of your own organization's constitution, is 35. And also, does it only just mean youth, or people must meet a particular standard? Because sometimes I feel the issue of youth and women on top is just pushed without principle and certain standards that are set on it. And maybe, for instance, what of branches in the instance of youth, no, in the instance of women, 50-50 delegation, what in the instance of branches that are just 100% male? I'm sure there are such cases. What happens in that regard? Also, to circumvent the wishes of the branch by saying, we want two men to represent us, by recalling one man and putting one woman. What does that say about the respect of democratic processes by the ANC itself? And maybe leave it there for now. I'll come back for a second.
Okay. We just take questions in Kulua for the first round and then deal with them.
Maybe 5 and then we
Okay.
Some Kgalema of the SABC. Kulua, on the issue of particularly ANC leaders who have one standing in society, you've got a president of the ANC who is accused of money laundering, torture, and issues of palapa and the dollars. Would that kind of a person still be morally upright to lead the ANC in December? You've got Dr. William Kizi on corruption of digital rights. Is he still morally upright? And there are many other leaders whom are accused of many other issues within the governing party. How are you going to fine-tune and see who is eligible or not? Then are the issues of delegates. Conference is the highest decision-making body of the party. If delegates at that conference of the ANC in December stand up and say a suspended individual can still contest and disregard these guidelines that you've set up as the highest decision-making body of the party, would they have that constitutional right to disregard that particular document and bring back Esma Khashule from the dustbin of political history at this point in time? Then, on the elections in Kenya, just your word on what other African countries have learned on the election of William Ruto and how they were able to avert any political killings within the country this time around. Thank you.
one clarity. Is it true that certain branches which fall under the category called condone, will those branches be allowed to nominate candidates as well? I think these are branches that don't necessarily meet the threshold as well. And then maybe just for clarity on the issue of gender parity, the 50% one. We saw at the previous conference, like my colleague just alluded to, in the Northwest, where there was what one would call a substitution of candidates as well. How are you crucially looking at highlighting this issue to make sure that it doesn't happen and that it does not threaten the integrity of the conference as well? I think that's it for myself.
So it's already anticipating that there are branches that might not make quorum. Because we are creating a category for the ANC. We don't have a category called condone. I'm saying he's already anticipating that some branches might not meet quorum.
Oh, yeah.
So he's creating a category for himself, I don't know. But he has successfully done it through his question.
From Newsroom Africa. Just touching on the issue around ANC members who are indeed facing charges and stemming from your suspended Secretary General. When you look at these rules overall, do you think that they are not too harsh and they are fair for your ANC members? And what happens when you find yourself in a situation just like the suspended Secretary General Esma Hashule, who is then exonerated from his charges just after that conference in December? Did you discuss then what happens for those who are not given an opportunity to participate in the conference? And also looking at my notes quickly, NEC candidates may campaign as organized slates or lists. I mean, and you are saying that candidates may express support for each other. No one may distribute lists or slates of officials and NEC members that delegates should vote for. How will you regulate that? I mean, looking at the previous conferences which we've seen, people campaign on social media, and you can't really pin that down and pin it on, a particular slate or a particular grouping. So how will you regulate, especially the distribution of lists and slates before conference? And my last one on vote buying. You are also then presenting more issues there on vote buying, saying that it will also not be accepted. How will you also be able to track down indeed whether a candidate is indeed buying a vote? Because we know that these are done through back doors, and it's something that it can be done behind closed doors, and no one can actually pin that down and say indeed that these branch members have been bought by a particular person. Thank you very much. This that should be
Okay, we've got Junior and Lisa in the back.
Okay, just a quick one from me. You spoke about young people. You're able to try and get 25% of the elected people being young people. But also you think that for you to stand, you have to have been a member for more than 10 years. Is that not contradiction there? Because you spoke about an age group of the youth from 14 until 35. So in 1990, that they will disqualify them automatically.
Former President Yusega from the Bailey Government, just three clarity-seeking questions. One is just an add-on to what Imani was saying around organized slates. Would that rule not have been more effective during the provincial conferences, given that we've seen that there's been clean sheets of slates emerging in those elected conferences? Isn't it too late to introduce this rule now? When you say, given that there's the BC and other conference management committees kind of drag when it comes to action or finalization of their recommendations and implementing when it comes to these committees making finding the rulings. You say that you have come back with recommendations and findings? Because you could find that these things come back after the elective conference, or maybe the year after. When it comes to the financial records, you say that you'll be inspecting financial records. What does that mean? What would you be looking for exactly in those financial records? You have a president whose financial records are sealed from the 2017 conference. How do you navigate those kind of circumstances?
No, thanks. You want to come in? Come in, I'm sure when Kuluwa speaks, he will clarify the difference between a young person and youth, so that we are not confused on what we are trying to do here.
I just want to add clarity on what constitutes a serious crime, because some people may argue that in the case of in the Northwest, the current chairperson, the newly elected chairperson, is facing a criminal case, and yet he hasn't been forced to take a back seat or step aside. And also on the issue of people who are not allowed or prohibited from standing for the nomination or election, would that rule of disallowing them even when there are appeals that are going through the courts, is that not preempting the processes of the courts to say they won't be allowed, even if the court can exonerate them before the elective conference?
Okay, we take the last two hands, and then so that Nkuluwa can have a fair chance to deal with. You want to start first?
Yeah, I'll start. My name is Salilo from Salam Media. Just wanted to clarify.
Salilo from?
Salam Media.
Salam.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify from the Deputy President. He mentioned something about a whistleblowing kind of regulatory body that will be enforcing.
Like a website, a portal.
Yeah,
Sort of.
We just want to find out if will this be an independent body, or it will be from the structures of the ANC, and who does it comprise of? Maybe you can just unpack that a bit for us.
Or you want to know who makes up the portal? Okay, okay. That's fine. You captured that one. Good.
Yeah. SABC from UFM. ANC meetings have become violent in nature, so much that a large contingent of police and emergency personnel get deployed to police. Is there any plan to keep nominating processes now to the extent that the public resources are used for what is essentially a private affair, where ordinary South Africans often don't get help from police or emergency services?
Okay. Kuluwa, you want to deal with?
Okay. Let's try and clarify some of the questions. The issue of young people, this generational mix, is not restricted to the membership of the ANC Youth League, which, as you know, starts at the age of 14 to 35. That is why I was giving you the example of a 40-year-old being relatively young. If in the old Soviet Union, if you were 60, you were regarded as youth at 60 years old. So the members of the Politburo were from the 70s into the 80s, and hence they were derogatory referred to as the geriatric ward. So that's where relativity comes in. For a long time, the chairperson of the ZANU-PF youth wing was a 60-year-old. But that's why I'm saying it's a relative term, And truth be told, the ANC structures at this point in time are actually led by a generation of COSAs. Not even the first generation of COSAs. The third generation of COSAs leaders are leading the ANC structures, branches and regions and so on, as it were. And now here these rules, what the NEC decided was that these rules will commence with the 55th National Conference. So hence they were adopted in July, last month. So the processes that you are alluding to and the happenings in the regional and provincial conferences and so on, as I said, some of these rules applied there, the ones that are in the ANC constitution specifically. But the electoral committee was not in charge of those processes. Its mandate will commence with the nominations for the National Elective Conference and beyond. In other words, beyond this the National Conference, the same rules would apply whether it's a branch general members meeting or regional conference or provincial conference and so on and so forth. So the efficacy and effectiveness of the rules should not be judged on what happened in the current conferences of the ANC. That's a different matter altogether. So the issue of representativity, that section was meant to guide branches. That's why it has to be read out to the branches, so that the participants in the branch meeting must know the importance of this selection and nomination of people who may be elected to serve in the National Executive Committee. They must understand the importance of the National Executive Committee. That's why this section is so important. Because remember, the membership, get what they deserve. And what this rule is trying to do is to inspire them to set the bar a little higher than, because in certain cases, people nominate each other, out of malice. So it's like if I were to call for volunteers out of you here, very few people will volunteer themselves. They will volunteer the next person. And so nomination, when it happens like that, some people think, no, well, if I'm in this branch executive committee, I'm going to have to attend these meetings regularly and so on. So no, but I think Pule can do that. So I nominate Pule. So you see, what we're saying is nomination should be informed by the understanding of the importance of this structure for the National Executive Committee. And that the bar and the standard should be set a little higher, and only the members can do that. So you elect people that you will hold accountable, and not just as a box ticking exercise. So we are talking about nominations here, and so if a branch is 100% all male, then there's something wrong with that branch actually. It would not be a branch of the ANC that is properly constituted, you see, because the branches must be properly constituted. And in a community, it would be a very strange branch that is 100% male. It would probably be family and friends, really, not so much of a branch, as it were. Now, Samkelo, in tongue-in-cheek question, we don't do that. We don't recycle, leadership in the ANC. We actually don't do that because, if you were in leadership and you lit some flames, by the time you left, there was some flame flickering there. If you go back as ash, and you douse even the little flames that you'd have left there. So it's not something that we do. Now, moral standards are important. That's very important. It's important that the leaders who lead the organization must be unimpeachable. That's a very important criteria and standard. And so the vetting will happen at the point when the nominations have been completed. Then the Electoral Committee will go through each one of them to vet them. And anyone who would stand foul of these rules would then be disqualified, and reasons would be given as to why he or she doesn't qualify to be there. But the Electoral Committee does not do the work that the Integrity Commission does. It deals specifically with nominations and selection and election of leadership here. So that's what we should understand. Now, national conference is a structure no different from the branch executive committee or regional executive committee or national executive committee. Once it convenes and the credentials are adopted, it is a structure. And that is why, in its own right, it's a structure. And it conducts its business in accordance with the Constitution as amended by the previous conference and the rules of conference. So these rules would apply, and conference would only adapt them for the future and or amend them for the future, but not for the running of conference itself. So there's no room for conference to scupper them. Once that happens, that would be the end of the ANC, because it would mean that every conference will develop its own rules. But it works on the basis of rules developed by previous conferences. Now, I didn't quite get the question about the Kenyan elections, because this time round, I mean, they didn't lead to violent outbreaks along ethical lines, and the leader of opposition is on record as stating that he's going to the courts to appeal against the results. And we know in the previous elections, the courts actually overturned those results and they had to go into a rerun. So this time round, what I think is very helpful is the fact that they conducted elections in a peaceful way, and they are pursuing objections through the court, which is part and parcel of democratic practices here. Now, gender parity. The rules are very clear and straightforward and would be applied very strictly, that the constitution of the ANC stipulates that at least, and that's a minimum, 50% of all elected members of leadership structures should be women. So that's where the 50% gender parity comes from, and it would be applied. Now, the ANC constitution is written in a... So you have the National Executive Committee made up of 86 members. 86. But the way the constitution is written, the officials, what is colloquially referred to as top six, or the officials, are not a structure in and of themselves. They are the National Executive Committee. And so the way the elections are conducted at conference, it is the officials who are elected first. That's what the Constitution says. So you elect the top six first. And these rules are saying we would elect 4 of them first. President, Treasurer General, Secretary General, as well as the national chairperson would be elected first. And you come back to conference plenary, you announce those results. Then call for nominations from the floor for positions of Deputy President and Deputy Secretary General, and once that's done, delegates vote for that. Part of the rationale is to allow the delegates to realize, whether the 4 that is being elected is truly representative and all, in terms of all the criteria, and therefore have the opportunity to strike a balance in terms of all the aspects of that criteria. So the ANC Constitution refers to the top 6 as the National Executive Committee. And the 80 who get elected afterwards are called additional members. That's how the ANC Constitution is couched. The Constitution of the Republic is couched in the same way. The executive is the president. So cabinet is appointed by the president thereafter. Yeah. So that's how. So the rules are encouraging branches, even in the process of nomination, that they should also consider the top 6 and ensure that at least the 50-50 rule applies to the top 6 as well in terms of nomination. So that's quite new, and of course some of the questions that comrades raised were, this is not in the constitution of the ANC and so on, but change is brought about by, that's why you have quotas. Quotas are nothing but targets which are meant to focus attention on the need to address that balance. Yeah. So the rules also say, by the way, about gender, that should any of the branches, or when the tally is done at provincial level, find that they've nominated out of the 200 additional members, they've nominated only 40 females and the rest are males. The rules say we will disregard the rest of the males. So if it's 40 females, you take 40 males. And so that way, the branches are in fact directed to really try and apply their minds carefully about gender parity. The rules for how to convene co-rating meetings of the branch are contained in the ANC Constitution. That for a branch meeting to be legitimate, at least 50+1 of the membership must be in attendance, sign an attendance register, and participate. That way, you see, it's the majority of the members who would have participated in that. And this is to avoid the situation where only, a few people take decisions on behalf of the branch here. The rules have been adopted by the NEC, and the NEC accepts that they are fair, and that therefore they apply to everyone. So every member of the ANC accepts that these rules will apply to everyone, because fairness also has to be coupled with consistency. It must apply to everyone. So if there are those who are, through the vetting process at the end, are excluded, that's fair in terms of the rules. Campaigning, Mbali says there's a problem on how to monitor these things. The rules allow for campaigning through social media, and as long as it's not something that costs money, you see, to pay and so on, that's allowed. That's why campaigning through social media is allowed. Yes. The slates, I'm coming to the slates, yes. So the slates are what the resolution of conference said should be done away with, should be eliminated from these democratic practices. And of course, the way to do it is to inculcate and to clarify each member, so that members themselves, because remember, the best defenders of the organization are its members. So members themselves, once they are approached by me with a list, they should report me. You see, they should report me. There's no other objective way of knowing surreptitious activities. People who meet in the small hours of the day and so on, in dark corners, and conducting discussions in whispers. Unless you are there, you would not know. But you rely on your members who are there to call them out. And so that's why this becomes an organizational responsibility. Vote buying the same. Someone approaches you and offers you a post or whatever in exchange for your vote. They will succeed, of course, with some people, but the organization is banking on those with clear consciences who will be able to call them out and say, so-and-so approached me and this is what happened. Because this information, most of the time, is known by some members. I mean, we get to know about these things, even though, you may not have been part and parcel of those. That's how we think we would be in a position to eliminate these practices. Because you see, if there are no consequence management, and people get away and so with wrongdoing. Over time, they just do it flagrantly, and they know nothing will happen to them. So the rules are meant to put an end and a stop to that kind of practice. The 10-year requirement applies to the ANC National Executive Committee. So that's the requirement, and so it's not a contradiction to insist on that requirement and still, in the same breath, say there should be a fair representation of young people. That there's no contradiction in terms there. Lisa Gas says, is it not too late to introduce these rules? Well, in relation to what we are observing and what has been unfolding in the provinces and so on, that, you know, a provincial conference is scheduled to take place for 3 days or 4 days, and for 3 days they are quibbling about credentials that hardly adopt the credentials except you know, in the last day, and they are only able to elect top 5, and they will come back after 2 weeks to complete the conference. I mean, you know, somebody simplified this thing to me and said, look, you know, credentials are in attendance register. How can people for over 3 days go just on attendance register? It's a simple thing. So the rules, as I said, will apply to the 55th National Elective Conference, and probably from that conference beyond, the rules would then apply. So DC processes arising from you know, these nomination processes and so on, if a matter is referred to the DC, it would have to be treated with the agency of the situation. In the same way as, you know, in this country when in 2010 we were hosting the FIFA World Cup, there were special courts, and offenders would be apprehended within 3 days of committing an offense, and within that week tried and sentenced if convicted. So the DC would have to operate in that fashion. Financial records. The rules say each and every campaign must keep meticulous records of donations in kind or in money, and they must submit those records to the Electoral Committee so that they can be checked, you know, whether people were not, in other words, you received 10,000 and only 2,000 was spent on water, and the venue was free, and the 8,000, you can't explain what happened to it. It's not there. So it's questions like those that would have to be answered very clearly. I will not go into the sealed records. That's outside of the purview of our rules and responsibility. Serious crime relates to any crime that once charged and convicted would give you more than 6 months of imprisonment with no fine and so on. That's how that is regarded. And of course, you know, here you're drawing a distinction between someone who fails to pay traffic offense tickets, and they get arrested and so on. As distinct from someone who, is engaged in gender-based violence and so on, or the fraud or fraudulent activities and so on. So that's where the distinction is here of serious crime. So the matter of the example you gave of the chair of the Northwest, as I understand it, that's an ongoing matter and so on. And the rules are clear that even such people are ineligible. If you are awaiting, judgment, or you are appealing, or the case is still in progress, you are ineligible. So the rules are very clear about that. Those who are vetted out and disqualified because their matters are pending, and then at the time of conference itself, they are exonerated or cleared, they can't come back to conference unless that happens at the point where the nomination can happen from the floor, and they muster the requisite 25% support, then their names may be included at that point. But if it's beyond that point, it's hard luck. That's what would make you a tried and tested member going forward, if you remain loyal even after being excluded like that. Yeah. Well, the portal for whistleblowing is to be established, in due course, because these processes have been set in motion, and once it is established, you will all get to know of it here. The posse of police at ANC conferences, actually the ANC conferences shouldn't have police. What brought the police to the ANC conferences? ANC conferences prior to 1994 were held with no police. Police were never anywhere near ANC conferences. What brought police into ANC conferences is the fact that the ANC is a governing party, so you have a section of the national leadership being ministers and presidents and deputy presidents, and so the protection units accompany them. And that's how you end up with police. But ordinarily, ANC gatherings would have no police participating in them. Yeah. Thank you, Comrade Good. I hope I've answered all the questions.
Oh, you did actually. It was a very good lecture. They are now sorted. They are quite... follow up.
Yeah, it's actually not a follow-up. It's actually to the national spokesperson of
Yes.
ANC. Just yesterday, the financial body released that statement saying that you owe workers 86 million rand in public funding, is instructed to pay 10 million rand every month from here onwards. You find yourself in a very uncomfortable state in your financial status of not paying workers as well. As a reaction, getting reaction from the ANC, how do you plan to do this if you continue to say that you do not have money to pay staff? At the same time, opposition parties in parliament saying that they will be instituting a motion of no confidence against President Ramaphosa in parliament. Just your reaction, please. Thank you.
Okay. Covered.
No, just a follow-up from me. I'm not sure if you answered my question on you meeting this criteria and whether.
He said they don't recycle.
Yes. But Mkulu will also be conflicted, remember. He is running a process. He has agreed to run a process on the account that is removed from expressing interest. It's as easy as that, matters of conflict of interest. Yes.
Disqualified or disinterested? Okay.
He's already disqualified by the fact that he chairs the Electoral Committee.
No, but on the content itself, leadership, you say social media is allowed, but as long as there's no payment, I don't know if you guys, when you were discussing this particular part, you were aware of the influencers phenomenon, which is people who are paid by someone to push a particular narrative, which can be used in the form of campaigning for a candidate, and you would never be able to know. They may pretend like they are just tweeting because they like Hule for president.
No, he's giving an example.
Still on the funding, when you, I understand, we all understand what the declaration, but I'm thinking, I'm sure most of these rules are meant to bring about fairness in the campaign thing itself. How do you make it fair? For instance, let's say in my political president campaign, I'm pumping in a lot of money, but in your campaign, as you grew up for president, there is no money at all that is coming. How do you make sure that there is balance between these two candidates that are campaigning for the same position and that there's a fair spread? In fact, the ANC, how does it come in to assist those that may not necessarily have, private donors and people who believe they can throw in money into their campaign? That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, you want to start?
Yeah. Okay.
Considering that the ANC doesn't send anyone to contest.
Yeah. Well, part of the consideration really is that the use of money to buy influence directly with members should be eliminated. And that's why, however, it's accepted that campaigning would happen and should happen. But that, the organizational platforms, if I'm contesting in this province with Comrade Pule, the structures, when they avail a platform for Comrade Pule to explain where he comes from and all of that, they should also afford me the same opportunity. So organizational platforms should be available or availed to all those who are nominated. And the issue of social media is allowed. And if there's manipulation even there, the ANC, you see, when let me use an example here. When we have children in your home, the DSTV, advertise that, the remote control, you press this, that, and your children will not see the blue movies. But many parents need a manual to know how to operate a microwave. The children don't need the manual. They crack that. So if you want to protect your children, you can't succeed only by using the restrictions that are based on the remote control. You may have to sit them down and explain to them that movies are make-believe, they are not real. So then they can watch whatever and know that it is not real. it's a make-believe, and so on. So, so similarly, in terms of...
No, thanks, Mkulu. Around the Financial Service Conduct Authority. And what was the other one?
It was the political parties in Parliament.
Oh, okay. And those ones of yesterday. So the Financial Service Conduct Authority has been in engagement with the African National Congress through our own fund managers. Fund managers have got a fiduciary duty to report when organizations are unable to perform certain of their financial obligations. So the Treasurer General has been in engagement with both the Financial Service Conduct Authority and the fund managers. A plan has been put in place which has been shared or is being shared with the staff representatives on what the ANC is doing to attend to that. Already with the fund managers, an undertaking is that we have got to come up with about 10 million rand to be able to deal with that debt. But there are a number of options that are available, provided for by the Financial Services Conduct Authority, and those are legislated. We wouldn't really want to go on record with those because our Treasurer General has assured us that they are working on a plan and all the relevant parties affected by these developments have been briefed. You see, this morning it was quite difficult in Mkolwa because we're having to clarify some radio stations on how the ANC goes about raising funds and fulfilling its own commitments. Because we're a fundraising-based organization. We've clarified to ourselves in the media on some of the challenges brought to us by the enactment of the Political Party Funding Act, which now imposes certain thresholds on how much entities and private individuals are able to give as part of fundraising to parties. The reduction of our own seats even in Parliament affects how much we are able to now make out of the IEC funding. But one of the morally correct things that the ANC has done was to make sure that even under COVID, we do not retire any one of our employees, expose them to unnecessary devastation. We did say we stand with our employees and understand conditions that they are facing and are trying to find more innovative ways to be able to deal with their plight. We are staying in contact with staff representatives, making sure that they are kept updated on measures that are being put in place. We constantly apologize to our employees for this devastation. Even with that, they still continue to commit their time to the work of the African National Congress, and for that we are thankful. They were there at the National Policy Conference. They picketed. They did go on a picket. They are allowed to do so. They've joined the union here. We recognize their right as employees. We do not victimize them because they've raised their own issues. It is well within their own right. We cannot affirm Labor Relations Act, and when it comes to the ANC, we want to send different rules for employees. So we understand their plight fully and are doing everything else in our power to be able to deal with that. As it relates to what happened in Parliament yesterday, we did say that the ANC does not dictate a program or an agenda for the opposition party. They decided to meet in the manner that they did as opposition political parties and pronounced themselves. It is their own position. What we have come out to say and place on record was that our president, when the issue of Pala came out, and we did acknowledge that this issue, Mkulua, has got a bearing on our own standing and imagery as the African National Congress. But we have said to journalists that the president of the ANC was on record and saying that he will voluntarily appear before the Integrity Commission so that where there are issues that require clarity, he is able to provide such. And he even went on to say that he will cooperate with the law enforcement agencies if they need answers from him. He will also cooperate with the any parliamentary process if such is also initiated. But we can't, as the ANC, dictate an agenda for the opposition. Because we're mindful of one thing. The opposition want that which the ANC has. It wants to be government. So every time they pick up on an issue that they believe can best debase the ANC going into 2024, in fact, we're going to see more of this makeshift press conferences and all of that. It's part of a campaign building block for 2024. The ANC accept that. You have got Ipsos that already say that we might be, throttling around, trailing around what? Trailing around 42% and so. But we are doing everything else ourselves. Not just to, while we recognize what research says, actually research empowers our efforts. All of the things that Mkulu was talking about today, on how we also want to introduce electoral reforms, they are part of our own attempts to be able to restore public confidence in the African National Congress, to make sure that the renewal of the ANC is about us regaining lost ground. So we're aware of those things, and we'll keep on coming back to yourselves and giving updates. The fact that the ANC can even go as far as saying, let us have a portal that deals with whistleblowing. Let us deal with the notion of money in campaigning. Let's create a platform where everyone could be able to contest and be elected in a position of responsibility. This is part of the building blocks of reclaiming, recovering, and winning back that lost confidence. So we're alive to all of those things. So I'm sure that all of your answers have been, all of your questions have been answered. We had agreed that Mkulwa will be here until 12 o'clock. Mkulwa, we're on time.
Okay, thank you.
We're on time. It's exactly 12 o'clock. And thanks to members of the media. I'm sure we've clarified your question on the two issues. Okay. No. Wait. No, we're not there. Huh? There? For nominations? 7th. Oh, we must also just make this important announcement. Cut-off dates for membership is the 3rd of September. So that those that are not aware could at least be aware that after the 3rd of September will not be entertaining new membership, especially for the 55th National Conference. It's all systems go. We have got a press briefing in the Northwest tomorrow with their provincial leadership, the officials, to allow them space to outline their state of readiness to conclude what they could not conclude, which was the election of additionals, as well as dealing with discussion documents. Okay. No, thanks. No. No, we have to conduct ourselves. No, we must conduct ourselves in a very proper manner. No, we are done. This brings us to the end of the briefing. Thank you very much. No. Don't cause problems for me, please. I'm doing my work. Yeah, I gave him a message. Whose room wants to talk to you? Tomorrow morning. I was going to suggest that when we do try and do a